The film begins in New Jersey, with two friends on a road trip trying to find their way by using the road map. Sometime later, they are forced to stop in the middle of the woods because of a burst tire. One of them goes to fix it, while the other relaxes inside the vehicle. But then, a mysterious figure lurks in the background and suddenly pulls her deep into the woods. Unaware of what happened to her friend, the other girl tries to call her friend until she notices someone approaching the van. She immediately screams as she realizes how zombie-like the person looks. Luckily, someone quickly jumps in and decapitates the zombie man before opening the back door of the van to save the girl. But he suddenly gets pulled away. Meanwhile, more zombie-like figures begin to swarm the car, killing the girl inside. The next scene takes us to the past, to a high schooler named Sarah, who is attending group therapy after losing her mother. Meanwhile, her dad, John, is the man we saw in the previous scene, is waiting for her outside. John is a pastor with two daughters, Sarah and Rebecca. The small family is tight-knit, though John is a tad bit overprotective. When they go shopping for a Christmas tree later that day, Sarah complains about John being so strict that she never attends any party, but John brushes her off and resumes shopping. However, when they're about to pay at the register, a random guy steps in and claims their tree is his. When the random guy gets hostile, John decides to be a pacifist and steps back. When they get home, Sarah teases his father about letting someone else take their tree. Later, John walks up to Sarah and allows her to attend a party tonight, and Sarah expresses her joy by embracing her father. The small family then goes to the church, where John preaches at the service, and he mentions what happened that day. He tells the people there about not choosing violence. Meanwhile, on the other side of the story, a drug dealer named Arlo meets with a gangster named Katie for a drug deal. But when Arlo reaches inside Katie's trunk to collect the payment, Katie smashes the trunk door against his back, causing him to fall to the floor. Up next, he breaks Arlo's already broken leg and rams his mouth into the car exhaust, forcing the drug dealer to inhale exhaust fumes. Back to the service, Sarah says her goodbyes to her father before going to the party. Sarah then stops at a gas station to refuel her father's car, and we can see that Katie is also there filling up his car's tank. In the process, Sarah hears a guy screaming from the inside, none other than Katie's trunk. Afraid Sarah is going to report this to the police, Katie tries to capture her, prompting Sarah to retreat inside her car and drive away. But Katie tails after her in her panic. Sarah decides to call her dad to tell them what's going on and where she is. Unfortunately, Katie manages to overtake her, which causes her to crash by the side of the road. Wasting no time, Katie climbs out of the car and zip ties Sarah's hands to the steering wheel before pushing the car into the nearby lake. Afterward, John rushes to the scene, but when he arrives, it's too late. Sarah is gone. Sarah's death devastates the pastor and sends him on a spiral. After the funeral, a detective named Jed pays a visit to John and his family. Jed tells John that this wasn't a case of road rage because Sarah was found with her hands zip-tied to the steering wheel, and he promises the grieving John that he'll find whoever did this. While this goes on, Katie calls his brother, Vic, to inform him about all the money and drugs he's got with him right now. Excited, the brothers agreed to meet the next day. Detective Jed is on a mission. He goes to the gas station Sarah went to last night and asks to see the security footage. There, he sits down for hours, goes through the footage, and discovers Katie's license plate. Later on, Katie is seen being pulled over by a police officer for a traffic run. The officer stepped out of the vehicle, but before Katie could say anything, the unknown officer injects Katie with anesthesia. That evening, Katie's brother, Vic, is waiting for Katie to show up, but he never does. This confuses Vic, so he reports it to his boss, Otto. After hearing that Katie is missing, Otto is furious because the drugs and money Katie has is worth a lot. The leader informs Vic that the drug dealer always puts a tracker in their product. Therefore, he sends his goons on a manhunt for Katie. Meanwhile, it turns out that Katie is being held hostage in an underground lair deep in the woods and is being taught a very good lesson. He is being electrocuted repeatedly and being told that from now on, his name is Number 21. At the same time, the drug goons begin their search for Katie inside a drug den and start beating up everyone associated with Katie. Here is where they find a guide who keeps Katie's tracker and discover his location on the map. The next morning, John walks up to his youngest daughter, Rebecca, and hands her a bracelet as a gift to console her. But the little girl won't take it, so John puts the bracelet in his pocket. John then goes to meet Jed the detective at the bar, where the detective begins telling John that he is ready to give John the same opportunity that he was presented with many years ago. He then tells John a story from 10 years ago about Quinn Brady, an infamous rapist who would assign a number to his victims and torture them before terminating them afterward. As a young detective, Jed led the investigation and caught the rapist, but one day he was granted early release. Jed feels disappointed by the decision, but knows he can't do anything about it. To make matters worse, the first thing Quinn Brady did after his release was to seek revenge by brutally murdering Jed's pregnant wife when Jed was at work. "I'm looking for you." The reason why he's telling this story is to let John know that he knows exactly how painful it is to lose a loved one in the hands of someone else, and he knows what to do to rid of the pain. Jed also tells John that Quinn was eventually apprehended but not by the law. Up next, Jed suddenly asks if John would like to spend 1 minute alone with a guy to take vengeance for his daughter's death, revealing that Jed was the one who kidnapped Katie. John agrees, and they drive up to the detective's place in the woods, to a secluded cabin built by Jed. They descend to the secret underground lair, where Katie is tied up on the wall. Jed assures the pastor that this guy is guilty by laying out all the evidence he's found, and tells John to start attacking the man to cope with his grief. According to Jed, he did the same thing to Quinn Brady to heal from the pain of losing his wife, and it worked. So John should do the same. He then tells John to pick a weapon. John takes an ice pick and goes up to the man. He begins pressing it into his ear, but stops before long, because he doesn't have the heart to kill a man. To calm John down, Jed assures him that he doesn't even need to kill the man, just torture him. But John doesn't want any of that and wants to leave. Unfortunately, this disappoints Jed. He says he built the room because of people like him, so he electrocutes John until he passes out. Later, John wakes up strapped to a wheelchair in a different room, where Jed proudly shows him another hostage he's keeping inside a coffin for a week. It is a man who raped an 83-year-old. As it turns out, Jed keeps a lot more hostages. Over the years, he's been capturing pedophiles, rapists, and murderers. He would rename them with numbers and invite aggrieved loved ones to torture these people until they descend into madness. He also calls these hostages subhumans because Jed has put them through so much pain that they have become cannibalistic and behave like animals. Quinn Brady is one of the prisoners, and Jed now calls him number 1. Up next, he forces Katie into the subhuman's cage. Meanwhile, up on the surface, the drug goons arrive at the secluded cabin, looking for Katie. At Jed's orders, the subhumans attack Katie, while John is forced to watch. John takes advantage of the commotion to break free and hide. Right before Jed notices John's disappearance and believes that he has escaped, he starts running to the entrance, but soon comes across Vic and his boy. Meanwhile, John hands the subhumans the keys to unlock the cage and free themselves, just in time. The drug goons venture down the basement to look for Katie and start shooting at the subhumans out of fear, while the subhumans fight back and start mauling them. Jed is trapped in the middle of this too, and gets mangled by his pets. While they're all distracted, John runs upstairs and begins to look for car keys to escape. Soon enough, some of the subhumans start heading upstairs too, and begin attacking John. They pin him down to the ground, and among them is Quinn Brady, Jed's wife's killer. A beaten and bruised Jed staggers his way upstairs with a shotgun, and with nothing to lose anymore, he shoots Quinn Brady dead, before shooting the rest of the subhumans in the room. Bleeding out from being mangled to bits, Jed collapses, and John checks on his wounds. However, there's nothing he can do to save him, so John stays with him as he takes his final breath. Meanwhile, the rest of the subhumans have made it to the surface as well, and start trying to find a way to get inside the house. It is at this moment that John remembers about his youngest daughter, and realizes that he needs to get home to her no matter what. Here, John decides to pick up a machete and any other weapons he finds inside the house. He takes Jed's bike and rides the motorcycle out of the property, but crashes to the prisoner when he takes a sharp turn. The subhuman with the rope tied around his neck runs up to him and starts attacking him, and John manages to kill it by decapitating it with the bike wheel. But it's not over. Another one makes a jump on him right after, and he's forced to slash him in the throat. The next one he faces off against carries a shovel and tries beating John with it, so he swings the mash sheet to cut off his legs and stabs him in the chest. But all of a sudden, this is when he hears the sound of a van honk, and we get taken to the opening scene. In an attempt to save the girl in the van, John comes to her rescue by decapitating another subhuman. But just before he can save her, he gets dragged under the van and taken away, while the rest of the subhumans attack the girl inside the van. John kills the subhuman who dragged him and faces off against two more, which ends up in a bloody brawl down a river, which he walks out of victoriously. Afterward, he makes a run through the woods until he comes across a farmhouse where an old couple lives. The husband, Ed, goes to the barn to shred the Christmas tree, while his wife stays inside sipping coffee. Their dog suddenly starts barking, so the wife checks it out and finds someone tampering with their truck. Upon approaching the person, we learn that it is Katie looking to steal their truck. When the woman runs away in fear, Katie strangles her and drags her out in the yard. Her husband tries to help her, but he is outmatched. John arrives. Katie throws him through the window, and the two men get into a deadly brawl inside the house. Overpowered, John runs to the barn and attempts to climb up, but Katie halts him down. The bad guy then tries to break his skull with a metal press, all the while taunting him by telling him Sarah's last words, which was, "Where is my daddy?" While in pain, John starts kicking aimlessly, accidentally turning on the shredder. At the same time, he reaches into his pocket, which contains a bracelet that he wanted to give Rebecca. He uses the bracelet to stab Katie in the eye and frees himself from the metal press. While Katie struggles to take the bracelet out of his eye, John sends him stumbling into the shredder. The man then slowly gets sucked in and shredded to death. John then picks up the bracelet from the ground. The next scene features John attending grief counseling his daughter used to. He shares his feelings with the group, and they comfort him with their kind words. Some time has passed, and he seems to be a lot better. During the service, he reads a Bible verse about how God is an armor who can help you defend yourself. After the service, he takes his daughter Rebecca for softball practice, when a grown man barges in and kicks her out of the arena because he wants to use it. When John sees this, he confronts the guy and asks him to reason, but the guy only starts to insult him. Unlike in the beginning of the movie, John now stands up for himself and his family. What do you think of this recap? Please drop all your thoughts in the comments section below. One like from you and maybe subscribing would be great support for us. And that's it for now. See you in the next videos.